You see, Avengers Doomsday might not just be the next team-up movie. It could be the MCU's darkest turning point. The moment where every journey we've seen so far finally collides, fractures, and reshapes reality itself. But here's the question that started all of this for me. What if Avengers Doomsday isn't about the heroes uniting, but about one man's journey to destroy the very concept of heroism? What if Thanos wasn't the true beginning of the end, but merely the warning shot? Today we're diving deep into a theory that ties together the Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame, and the upcoming Avengers Doomsday, all through one consistent thread: the idea of the journey. When I rewatched Infinity War recently, something hit me. Something I couldn't unsee once I noticed it. Every Russo brothers Marvel movie has revolved around the concept of a personal journey, and not just any journey, a journey of discovery, destruction, and rebirth. In The Winter Soldier, it was Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff uncovering the horrifying truth that S.H.I.E.L.D., the very institution they believed in, was actually Hydra in disguise. That wasn't just a twist, it was a test of loyalty, identity, and belief. It forced Steve to abandon everything he knew and rebuild himself from the ashes of deception. Then, in Civil War, that same theme evolved. This time, it wasn't about uncovering the corruption of an organization, it was about the corruption within a family. The Avengers, who had grown into a surrogate family across multiple films, began to fracture under moral and emotional pressure. Tony and Steve, two men with the same goal but entirely different methods, clashed in a way that redefined what right even meant in their world. And at the center of that conflict was Helmut Zemo. Not a superpowered villain, not an alien warlord, but a broken man with a plan so human, so painfully real, that it tore the Avengers apart more effectively than any cosmic threat ever could. And that's where the Russo brothers' genius lies. They don't just make superhero movies, they make journeys. Every film is about a character facing their reflection and realizing they've become something they swore to fight against. Now, fast forward to Infinity War. The focus shifts entirely. For the first time, the heroes take a back seat. The entire movie, structurally, emotionally, and thematically, is Thanos' journey. It's his quest, his sacrifice, his philosophy. We, the audience, experience the MCU through the eyes of the villain. That was a bold move. It's as if the Russo brothers said, let's make the most personal movie in the franchise about the man who wants to erase half of existence. And somehow it worked. We understood Thanos, even if we hated him. That's storytelling mastery. Then came Endgame, the emotional counterpart, the closure. It was no longer Thanos' story. It was the Avengers' final journey. A literal trip through time, confronting their pasts, correcting their mistakes, and finding meaning in loss. Each hero faced their own mirror. Tony met his father. Thor met his mother. Steve revisited Peggy. Natasha confronted her guilt. Every one of them found peace, or at least purpose, in the end. So when you look at this trajectory, the Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame, it becomes crystal clear. The Russo brothers build narratives around transformation, around what happens when power, morality, and identity collide. That's why I believe Avengers Doomsday won't be an ensemble story in the traditional sense. It won't be about the Avengers teaming up to stop a villain. It'll be about Dr. Taze, Doom's journey. And this time, the journey will belong to the man who defines control itself, Victor Von Doom. Think about it. Thanos' path was one of obsession, a mad crusade to balance the universe through force. Doom's path, on the other hand, will be one of manipulation. He's not a brute. He's a strategist, a scientist, a sorcerer. He's the perfect hybrid of Tony Stark and Doctor Strange's genius intellect with mystical mastery. But what makes Doom so terrifying isn't his power, it's his humanity. Unlike Thanos, who justified mass murder as balance, Doom hides his evil beneath reason. He believes in his own righteousness. That's what makes him infinitely more dangerous. You see, Doom doesn't need to snap his fingers. He'll convince you to do it yourself. And if you trace the Russo brothers' evolution as storytellers, this fits their pattern perfectly. Every villain they've written so far wasn't purely evil. They were ideological mirrors to the heroes. Winter Soldier had Hydra, Civil War had Zemo, Infinity War had Thanos, and now Doomsday will have Doom. Except this time, the mirror reflects not one hero, but all of them. Here's where things get really fascinating. The Russos love repeating structural motifs, story blueprints that echo across movies. In The Winter Soldier, the shocking revelation that S.H.I.E.L.D. was Hydra changed how we saw the MCU. In Civil War, Zemo's manipulation exposed the emotional weaknesses of the Avengers. And in Infinity War, the ending flipped the genre itself. The villain won. Each time they end on a revelation that reshapes everything. So what could that pattern mean for Avengers Doomsday? Well, if Winter Soldier exposed an enemy hiding inside the system, and Civil War exposed an enemy hiding inside the family, and Infinity War exposed an enemy who was the protagonist, then Doomsday might expose something bigger, an enemy hiding inside the multiverse itself. And I think that enemy, or at least the one who discovers it, is Victor Von Doom. Now, let's rewind a little to the end of Endgame. Steve Rogers chooses to stay in the past, living out a peaceful life with Peggy Carter. It's a beautiful ending, a reward for everything he's endured. But when you really think about it, that decision carries cosmic consequences. By staying behind, Steve created a new timeline, a divergent branch. And according to Loki, that kind of decision is exactly what causes incursions, catastrophic collisions between universes. But here's the thing. In Loki Season 1, He Who Remains allowed the Avengers time travel because it was supposed to happen. He built the sacred timeline around it, which means Steve's actions were part of the grand design until Loki took the throne and let the branches grow freely. So once those restrictions were lifted, Steve's timeline, the one where he stayed with Peggy, could have spiraled out of control. And that might be where Doom's obsession begins. Imagine this. Doom in his relentless quest for perfection traces the root cause of the multiverse's collapse. He follows the trails of incursions, time fractures, and reality distortions, and they all lead to one event: Steve Rogers staying in the past. In Doom's eyes, that's the original sin, the spark that set fire to the multiverse. Now picture the opening of Avengers Doomsday, mirroring Infinity War's cold open, no exposition, no cheerful overture, just chaos. We see an elderly Steve living quietly with Peggy, maybe even with a family. The world looks peaceful, the music is soft, and then everything shatters. Doom appears. No army, no warning, just his voice. Time should have never allowed this. In a flash of power, everything Steve built turns to ash. Peggy disappears, the house burns. Doom doesn't kill Steve, he leaves him alive to witness the destruction of the life he stole from time. Because in Doom's mind, justice isn't mercy, it's balance. That's how Avengers Doomsday begins. Not with a team-up, not with a new hero, but with the death of peace itself. And that's where the journey theme reemerges. Only now it's Doom's journey. He's not just a villain. He's a man who's lost everything, who's watched his world decay because of the arrogance of others. The same arrogance the Avengers showed when they played gods with time. But Doom doesn't just want revenge, he wants control. He sees the multiverse as a collapsing system, endless chaos caused by heroes and villains alike. King Loki, the TVA, the Time Stone, the Infinity Saga, all of it in his mind is a result of disorder. So, he decides to do what no one else dared to. Rebuild the multiverse in his image. That's why he's more terrifying than Thanos. Thanos ended half of existence out of mercy. Doom will reshape all of existence out of pride. And that's what makes this theory so spine-chilling, because it means Avengers Doomsday isn't just another war, it's a reckoning. The Avengers, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, every universe will pay the price for what came before. And Doom will make sure of it. But here's where it gets even deeper. What if Doom isn't entirely wrong? Because if Steve's choice did cause the multiverse to spiral, if incursions are the result of human emotion, of love, of selfishness, then maybe Doom's mission to fix it makes sense. Maybe he's not a villain at all, but a reflection of what happens when the desire to do good becomes the need to control it. And that's where I think the Russo brothers are heading. Every one of their Marvel films has blurred the line between right and wrong. And Doomsday will push that line until it breaks. Because what's more terrifying than a villain who believes he's right? A hero who realizes he might be wrong. And that's the foundation of everything that's coming next. So, if Avengers Doomsday begins with the fall of Steve Rogers' timeline, that brutal, emotionally crushing confrontation between Doom and the man who broke time, then what happens next? This is where the real heart of the story begins. Because you see, unlike Thanos, whose motivations were built on the concept of balance, Doom's motivations are built on pain. And that's a huge difference. Thanos' ideology was cosmic, it was impersonal. He wanted to fix the universe by numbers, a cold calculation. Doom, however, acts from the scars of personal loss. He's a man who's been betrayed by the world, scarred by his own ambition, and haunted by a tragedy that he blames on the arrogance of others. If you look at the pattern of the Russo brothers' storytelling, you'll notice something fascinating. They never write villains who simply want to rule the world. Every antagonist they've created has an emotional wound at the center of their philosophy. The Winter Soldier's brainwashing was rooted in pain. Zemo's hatred came from grief. Thanos' crusade came from obsession. Doom's comes from guilt. Now in the comics, Victor Von Doom's tragedy begins in Latveria. Born to a poor Romani family, he loses both of his parents, his father to persecution, his mother to the devil himself. Doom grows up believing he can outsmart fate, outthink death, outmaneuver destiny. His genius becomes both his gift and his curse. And that's the part I think the Russo brothers will lean into, the God complex born from grief. Because if there's one thing the MCU's Phase 5 and 6 are showing us, it's that grief is the ultimate catalyst. Wanda broke reality over vision. Loki redefined it through love. Strange corrupted it through fear. And Doom will conquer it through guilt. So imagine this. After the opening act where Doom destroys Steve's peaceful timeline, we cut to Doctor Strange. Not the arrogant master of the mystic arts we once knew, but a fractured man still reeling from the events of Multiverse of Madness. He's seen universes die. He's seen his own variants corrupted by the Darkhold. He knows what it means to lose control. And it's in that broken moment that he senses something different, an anomaly unlike anything he's encountered before. Not a typical incursion, not a Kang variant, something colder, older, smarter. He traces it back through magical disturbances, cosmic signals, and remnants of corrupted timelines. And what he finds terrifies him. He discovers a pattern. Every reality that collapses, every universe that implodes, shares one consistent anomaly, an energy signature originating from Latveria. That's how Doom enters Strange's radar. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In the comics, Doom and Strange share one of the most fascinating rivalries in all of Marvel. They're both men of intellect and ego, both trying to command forces that even gods fear. And yet, in the Secret Wars storyline, Strange actually ends up joining Doom. Not because he believes in Doom's methods, but because he sees no other way to save existence. That moral dilemma, the choice between doing what's right and doing what's necessary, is exactly what defines the Russos' style. It's what made Infinity War so powerful. Strange giving up the Time Stone wasn't cowardice, it was calculation. But what if in one of those outcomes he saw Doom as the only possible savior? That's the chilling idea. What if Doctor Strange already knew Doom would rise? What if the entire chain of events, from Steve staying in the past to Loki freeing the timelines to Strange unleashing incursions, was part of the cosmic loop Doom was destined to exploit? You see, Doom isn't a man who reacts, he prepares, he anticipates. And if you take that trait and apply it to the MCU, you get something terrifying. A villain who's been watching from the shadows, learning from the mistakes of gods. When Thanos failed, Doom learned patience. When Kang fractured time, Doom learned precision. When the Avengers resurrected the dead, Doom learned consequence. Every action they took was a lesson for him. That's why I believe the second act of Avengers Doomsday will shift from a purely emotional story into a grand-scale cerebral war, not fought with armies, but with knowledge, manipulation, and deception. Because Doom's greatest weapon isn't magic or metal, it's understanding. Now, let's talk about Doom's power in this context. In the comics, he's both a scientist and a sorcerer, a man who bridges technology and mysticism. He builds machines that bend reality, but he also wields spells that can rewrite fate. That duality makes him unique in the MCU's current lineup. We've had characters who represent one side or the other. Tony Stark with technology, Doctor Strange with magic, but Doom combines both. He is the synthesis, and that's where the tragedy lies, because the more he tries to fix the world, the more he becomes the thing he despises, a false god. Imagine a sequence where Strange confronts Doom for the first time. Doom stands in his armor, regal and emotionless, surrounded by ancient machinery pulsing with green energy. Strange warns him that his experiments are tearing holes in the multiverse. Doom replies, calm and measured, "You tore the holes, Doctor. I'm merely sewing them shut. That line alone could define his entire philosophy. Doom doesn't see himself as a destroyer, he sees himself as a savior, and that's the scariest kind of villain there is. One who believes he's the hero of his own story. So, as Strange and Doom clash, the tone of the movie starts to shift. What began as a personal vendetta becomes a global then cosmic crisis because Doom's actions, his attempt to rebuild the timeline, start triggering conflicts across realities. And that's where the X-Men enter the picture. Now, remember, the Russos love mirroring themes. In Civil War, we saw heroes versus heroes. It wasn't about good and evil, it was about ideology versus ideology. I believe Avengers Doomsday will mirror that idea, but on a multiversal scale. Instead of Team Cap versus Team Iron Man, it'll be universe versus universe. The Avengers will represent one side of the moral argument, the belief that humanity, even in its flaws, must decide its own fate. The X-Men, on the other hand, will represent the belief that evolution or intervention is necessary to survive the end of all things. And Doom, he'll stand in the middle, manipulating both sides, watching the worlds collide, not out of chaos, but out of calculation. Think of it like a cosmic chessboard, every hero a pawn, every universe a piece, and Doom the player who already knows the outcome. Now this is where the journey pattern resurfaces again. Because while the first act sets up Doom's emotional journey, the second act expands it into a philosophical one. This is the moment where Doom's ideology starts to spread. People, heroes even begin to agree with him, and that's how the Russos will twist the narrative knife. Imagine seeing Strange, Reed Richards, or even Wanda listening to Doom's logic and realizing he's not entirely wrong. That the multiverse does need order. That maybe after all this chaos, someone needs to take control. That's how villains win, not by force, but by persuasion. So, while Strange and the remaining Avengers scramble to contain the incursions, Doom starts building something extraordinary. A device that fuses magic and quantum energy. A world engine. Something that can stabilize one universe at the cost of another. And here's the cruel beauty of it. The machine works. He proves his theory. A dying universe is absorbed and another one survives. Doom literally saves reality, but at the cost of trillions of lives. That moral paradox becomes the beating heart of Doomsday, because now Strange faces an impossible choice. Stop Doom and risk total collapse, or let him continue and watch infinite lives perish for the sake of stability. It's the same kind of emotional no-win scenario we saw in Infinity War when Strange had to give up the Time Stone, or when Steve had to fight Tony in Civil War. The Russos thrive in moral gray areas, and Doom gives them the perfect stage to explore that again, but on a multiversal level. And here's where I think they'll insert one of their signature mirror moments. In Civil War, Tony says, "If we can't accept limitations, we're no better than the bad guys." Doom will echo that philosophy, but twist it. He'll say something like, "If we can't impose limitations, we're no better than children playing with matches." That single line, that inversion, defines the gap between hero and villain. I picture a scene that mirrors Infinity War structure. Multiple teams scattered across the multiverse, each chasing fragments of a greater puzzle. Strange and Wong hunting magical relics, Reed and the Fantastic Four investigating cosmic rifts, the X-Men dealing with the fallout of mutant incursions. And in the shadows, Doom watching it all unfold like a director watching his film. And here's the brilliant, chilling twist. Every mission, every lead, every clue, all of it leads back to Doom because he planned it that way. Every battle they win is a step in his grand design. Every discovery brings them closer to the truth, but it's a truth he wants them to see. He's not trying to stop the incursions anymore. He's testing the heroes, proving that they'll always make the same mistakes, always choose emotion over logic, always fail to see the bigger picture. By the midpoint of the film, Doom's ideology has already taken root. Some heroes secretly side with him. Strange becomes conflicted. Reed starts to doubt the Avengers' methods. Even the TVA remnants of Kang's system begin to see Doom as the reset they've been waiting for. And then comes the defining midpoint moment, the shattering event. In Infinity War, it was the death of Gamora. In Civil War, it was the reveal of the Winter Soldier killing Tony's parents. In Doomsday, it'll be the collapse of an entire universe. Imagine this. Strange and the Avengers finally locate the source of Doom's world engine. They confront him, battle him, nearly stop him, and in his final act of defiance, Doom activates it. A single universe, maybe one that includes heroes we've grown to love, disintegrates before their eyes, gone, wiped from existence. And Doom doesn't flinch, he simply says, "Now you understand." The silence that follows would hit harder than any explosion because for the first time, the heroes realize they're fighting someone who doesn't fear loss, someone who embraces it. And that's the turning point. The heroes regroup, fractured and shaken. Strange questions his own role in creating this mess. The Avengers doubt their own judgment. The X-Men blame the Avengers for their arrogance. The multiverse begins to crumble faster than ever. And in the midst of it all, Doom stands tall, calm, resolute, convinced that the only way forward is through him. That's when we truly understand the scope of his plan. Doom doesn't want to end the multiverse. He wants to consolidate it, to merge the surviving realities into a single controlled existence, his version of paradise. The seeds of Battleworld begin here. But of course, we're not there yet, not fully. This act is about descent, the slow unraveling of trust, the ideological infection that spreads across the heroes. By the time it ends, the Avengers aren't united anymore. Strange is torn between logic and morality, and Doom. He's already won half the battle because he's convinced everyone that maybe, just maybe, his way is the only way left. That's the brilliance of the setup. It's not a war of fists, it's a war of faith. And the heroes, for the first time since Thanos, start to wonder if they're on the wrong side of history. By the time Doom activates the world engine and wipes out an entire universe, the multiverse itself begins to scream. Reality bends, physics twists, and you can almost feel the MCU's fabric tearing apart thread by thread. What started as a philosophical argument has become a cataclysm that no one truly understands anymore. And here's where everything changes. The war doesn't begin with a declaration. It begins with silence. That eerie moment after Doom says, "Now you understand." The surviving heroes just stand there shocked, powerless. Doctor Strange, Wanda, Reed Richards, even Thor, they stare into the cosmic void where a universe used to be. There's no debris, no sound, no explosion, just absence. The truest form of death. I can almost picture it cinematically. Strange whispering, "He did it." Thor lowering his hammer, whispering, "A world gone." And Doom, unmoved, walking through the haze, his voice cutting through the void like iron. "You call yourselves protectors. You protect nothing." That's when it hits them. Doom isn't a villain in his own mind. He's a reformer. He's doing what he believes the gods failed to do. Reset creation. Now remember the Russo brothers' pattern of escalation. They always shift from personal stakes to global, then to existential. Winter Soldier was about loyalty, Civil War was about ideology, Infinity War was about destiny, and Endgame was about legacy. So what's Doomsday about? Control. Control over existence, over consequence, over fate itself? And that's why Act 3 becomes the most crucial turning point. This is where the war for control begins, not just between heroes and Doom, but between the heroes themselves. The movie starts to fracture the same way Civil War did, but this time there's no government act dividing them. The division comes from within. Strange, haunted by the collapse of a universe, becomes consumed by the need to stop Doom. But not through compassion, through power. He begins experimenting with darker magic, fragments of the Darkhold he secretly kept hidden after destroying it. Wong warns him, but Strange dismisses it. We're beyond rules now. Meanwhile, Reed Richards is obsessed with understanding Doom's machine. He's not thinking emotionally, he's thinking like a scientist. If it worked once, he says, then it can be controlled. Sue Storm can see it in his eyes. That same spark of curiosity that once drove Victor himself, and she's terrified. On the other side, the Avengers are splintered. Thor, still recovering from the loss of countless lives, believes Doom must die no matter the cost. Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, hesitates. He knows revenge won't fix anything. And somewhere in between them, Bruce Banner tries to calculate the probability of multiversal collapse, realizing that if even one more universe falls, the chain reaction will consume them all. That's when we cut back to Doom. Alone in his citadel, surrounded by glowing sigils and quantum energy, he removes his mask for the first time. His face is still scarred, not just physically, but emotionally. And we see flashbacks, the death of his mother, the loss of his people, the betrayal of his own ambition. But then something new. A vision, a glimpse of a cosmic realm beyond even the TVA's comprehension, shapes, voices, beings watching him, the Beyonders. Now for comic fans, that name sends chills because the Beyonders are the gods behind the multiverse, entities who created and destroy realities for sport. They were the true cause of the incursions, and in this theory, Doom discovers them. He realizes the truth. The multiverse isn't collapsing by accident, it's collapsing by design. The Beyonders created the chaos as an experiment, and the heroes, the villains, every single death and rebirth were all variables in a cosmic equation. Doom doesn't just hate them, he vows to replace them. That revelation transforms his mission. He's no longer trying to fix the multiverse, he's trying to usurp its creators. This is where the narrative scale explodes. Doctor Strange, now aware of Doom's growing power, reaches out across realities for help. He uses the sling ring to open portals not just to other worlds, but to entirely different cinematic universes. We could see glimpses of characters from Fox's X-Men, the Sony Spider-Man worlds, maybe even animated variants like What If. Strange realizes that if Doom truly merges the multiverse, all of existence, every version of every hero is on the line. But this rescue mission comes with consequences. When Strange opens those portals, he accelerates the incursions even further. Reality starts to melt. Time collapses inward. Dimensions bleed together. You might even get surreal visuals. Asgard merging with Wakanda, the Sanctum Sanctorum floating above a desert from another Earth. It's chaos. Beautiful, apocalyptic chaos. In the middle of that storm, Doom makes his next move. He approaches the surviving universes not as a conqueror, but as a savior. He broadcasts his message across the multiverse using ancient magic and quantum energy. Your gods have abandoned you. Your heroes failed you. I will not. People start listening. Entire civilizations broken by incursions begin worshipping Doom as a messiah. They kneel before his holographic form, promising allegiance in exchange for survival. Doom forms his own army, not of soldiers but of believers. He calls them the Restored. And this is where the Russos' political storytelling instincts would shine. Because now the question becomes moral, not physical. When existence is collapsing, is survival worth submission? Strange sees the danger immediately. He's not saving them, he says, he's conditioning them. But the Avengers are losing hope, Sam argues. If Doom can stop the collapses, maybe we need to let him. It's the same argument Tony made in Civil War, trading freedom for safety. History repeating itself, but on a multiversal scale. Meanwhile, the Fantastic Four become the emotional core of this act. Reed feels responsible for Doom's path. After all, in many versions of their story, Reed and Victor were once partners. Sue reminds him that trying to outthink Doom is exactly what Doom wants, but Reed can't help it. And he believes if he can understand Doom's equation, he can reverse it. So, he builds his own machine, a counterworld engine powered not by stolen energy, but by hope. And this is where things get tragic. Because Doom anticipated this, he lets Reed finish it. He lets him believe he's won. And when Reed activates it, Doom channels the power back to himself, absorbing the energy and descending to something far beyond human. The beginnings of God Emperor Doom. Visually, it's the kind of transformation that would leave theaters silent. Doom standing on a floating platform, cloaked in white light, his armor molten and divine. The ground trembles. The heroes stare up in awe and terror as he declares, "You wanted a god. I accept it. I accept it." That's the end of the second act within this act, the moment of no return. Now, you might think that would be the endgame itself, but the Russos always use Act 3 as the spiral before the final climb. This is where hope feels extinct. Doom reshapes the surviving fragments of the multiverse into a single plane of existence. A patchwork world made from the ruins of countless realities. Different cities, planets, and timelines stitched together. If that sounds familiar, it should, because this is the birth of Battleworld. Imagine the scope: New York floating next to Asgardian ruins, Wakanda bordering a fragment of Xandar, the TVA citadel looming in the distance like a fallen monument. Doom's throne sits at the center, built from the remnants of every destroyed universe. He calls it the last reality.